Good morning, Village. I hope this video finds you well. I'm sitting out in my back garden enjoying some of the sunshine, and hope you're able to do the same. I just wanted to share a few thoughts this morning about some of the things the Lord is teaching me, and hopefully they're encouraging to you as well. I don't know how you've been spending your time during this. One of the things that we've been doing kind of late at night is introducing my eldest daughter to some of the films that she hasn't seen yet that are some of our favorites, just because maybe she was too young to understand them. And so we've watched Arrival and Inception and Interstellar this week. And all those movies have to do with human fragility and time, particularly. And Interstellar, particularly, not to give the whole plot away, but if you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to do that. It's the Earth is dying, and the protagonist has to kind of travel into deep space through wormholes and things like that. And because of quantum physics and things that I don't understand, essentially he experiences time differently as he's traveling than back on Earth. And so days to him are weeks and months back on Earth, and months to him are decades back on Earth, and experiencing time kind of differently. And it just got me thinking a little bit about time and how the Lord doesn't experience time in the same way that we do. And so much of probably our angst during this kind of quarantine time is about time. At what time will things start to change? At what time will they lift things? At what time can my life start to go back to normal? And our focus being on those things. And there's obviously a lot of validity in those kind of concerns, but they have to be, I think, brought into perspective, and for us to keep the right kind of view on the earth, on our life and on time. And for the Christian, it's imperative to have a paradigm shift from thinking temporally to eternally. A paradigm really is just this kind of way that we view the world, and because of certain kind of rules or boundaries. And when those rules change or those boundaries change, our perspective changes with that. And so one of the most famous paradigm shifts was with Copernicus, when he really discovered that we don't live in a geocentric system, that we live in a solar system, a heliocentric system, that the sun and the planets don't revolve around the earth, but the earth and the planets revolve around the sun. And once you know that changes, there's a paradigm shift there that kind of changed a lot of things. And for the Christian, our paradigm shift needs to be from one of just temporary, that this life, that this earth is all that we have, to one of an eternal paradigm, that this life isn't all that there is, that this earth isn't all that there is, that there is a God out there who is eternal, who is calling us to a new creation and an eternity with him. And so I've been thinking a little bit about this, and I want to just share a little bit of Psalm 39 with us this morning. So these are a section of Psalm 39. The psalmist says this. He says, "O Lord, make me know my end and what is the measure of my days. Let me know how fleeting I am." And that's a pretty mature prayer, because most of us don't want to know how fleeting we are. We think we're kind of invincible, and we just really want to focus our lives on today or our immediate kind of future. But he's asking the Lord to remind him, to show him how fleeting his life is. He says, "Behold, you have made my days a few handbreadths, and my lifetime is as nothing before you. Surely all mankind stands as a mere breath." He says, "Surely a man goes about as a shadow. Surely for nothing they are in turmoil. Man heaps up wealth and doesn't know who will gather." These are similar themes in the book of Ecclesiastes that we studied together. And then he says this in verse 11. I found this striking. He says, "When you discipline a man, you consume like a moth what is dear to him." And I just think this is the kind of time we're in. The Lord is consuming a lot of the things that have been dear to us. And I wouldn't be so arrogant to know exactly why the Lord has allowed a global pandemic like this. I think there's a billion different reasons. At least the Lord is working in a billion different ways, and we might know a few of them. But I can't help but ask and wonder, I wonder, is the Lord consuming things that are dear to us, that he is slowing us down, that he is pruning our lives? And our response to that can be one of anxiety. It can be one of worry. It can be one of like, I need the certainty in my life. And I've probably alluded to this in the sermons the last couple times I've spoken. as well. And that's something that I have to remind myself of. My life over the last couple of years has just been marked with uncertainty, from cancer and not knowing what would happen through that, to then a season of trying to discern, is the Lord ending our time here in Ireland and moving us to Los Angeles, and then the uncertainty of a global pandemic, putting all of that on hold. And I feel like my life has just been marked by liminality, this liminal space, which is like a threshold. You're not in one place, you're not in another, you're in this space in between, this liminal space, like an airport. It's not your home, it's not where you're going, it's this in-between space. And for the Christian, a lot of life is this liminal space, isn't it? Because this isn't our home. We are sojourners, as the Bible tells us to be. Our whole life on this earth, however many years the Lord gives us, is like a breath. It's fleeting. And so for us to be so consumed with these moments, and to the point where we forget to set them in perspective, of an eternal kind of perspective. One of the things about going through midlife is you're kind of forced to think about those things. You start to realize that your capacity is decreasing while your responsibilities are increasing, and it kind of makes you face your limitations and makes you face your mortality in ways that can be a crisis. And for those of you that are in the middle of that or have come through that, you probably know that experience. But this is what A.W. Tozer says about this kind of understanding our limits. He says this, he says, "How completely satisfying to turn from our limitations to a God who has none. Eternal years lie in his heart. For him, time does not pass, it remains. And those who are in Christ share with him all the riches of limitless time and endless years." Man, so much of our lives are marked by the responsibilities and the pressures of this world kind of clamoring for our attention. And it tends to squeeze our inner lives. It tends to starve our soul when we put too much weight on those things, when that's too much of our attention, to the point where we're forgetting the bigger perspective, that this life, that even our life being put on hold for a few months during quarantine, is nothing compared to the rest of our life. And that rest of our life is nothing compared to the eternity that God calls us into if we are in Christ. And so Paul knows this. He tells the church in Rome, in Romans 8:18, he says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us." And that doesn't mean that our sufferings are insignificant, that they're not real, that they aren't actually sufferings. They are. But he says, in comparison to the glory that's going to be revealed to us, man, these things they're not even worth comparing. There is no comparison. And so for whatever we're going through in this moment, it's understanding that eventually these things will be forgotten. They're not even worth comparing. Knowing that there's an eternal God, and this is a brief time that we are going through before he reveals himself to us. And that this time that we are going through, these sufferings, what is life, all the good and the bad, is actually for our good, that he is forming us into the image of his Son, that he is stripping things away, that he is consuming things that are dear to us, but they're temporary things. They're not things that will last. They're not things that form us deeply into the image of Christ. And so Paul tells the Ephesians in Ephesians 5, he says, "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of the time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." And that's the challenge, isn't it? And the challenge is for us in this time to examine our life, to not live as unwise, but as wise, to use our time as best as we can, and to really discern what the will of the Lord is. Lord, what is it that you're doing in this time? What does it mean to actively wait on you, to place my hope in you? What is it that you're doing in stripping things away from me, and paying attention to what we're paying attention to? I think I read that this week. Someone said one of the biggest parts of spiritual formation is paying attention to what I pay attention to. And this quarantine has given us an opportunity to pay attention to what we pay attention to. And so those are some thoughts that have been rolling around in my mind, the Lord is challenging me with. So I just thought I would share those with you. Encourage you to go look at those verses for yourself. Psalm 39, Romans 8:18, Ephesians 5, 15 to 17, and see what the Lord might do. Let's spend some time with him and seek him in these moments that we would live as wise people, because our time is short.